get out there and become part of the process. But frankly, it's a real problem here and across America. It's not acceptable. So I'm offering a bit of an admonition.
You're throwing down a gauntlet.
I'm throwing down a gauntlet a little bit. So we are back with the three candidates, Dave Cordell, Chris Fox, and Josh Cohen. And we're getting into our lightning round now. We're going to ask a series of questions and look for some rather hasty responses, kind of putting you guys on the hot seat if you don't mind.
And hopefully get to know them a little bit better.
Indeed. Rob?
Do any of you play a musical instrument? Josh?
I'm very rusty, but I played sax and piano.
Saxophone is a good answer.
I played tenor sax as a kid, and I tried guitar years ago, but my fingers are real short. It didn't work out well.
It's reading those beverage magazines.
Yeah, exactly.
Dave?
The musical ability went with my father, who played in the Army band and was asked to play around the world with Tommy Dorsey. And my son picks up instruments and teaches himself how to play. I pick them up and I can't figure out what end to use.
In the same order, what's on your iPod if you have one? If not, what's the last CD you bought?
I don't have an iPod, or even a, yep, it's the truth. I'm not paying 99 cents a song to download it from the web. What is the last CD you bought? I don't know. It's been a while. You're behind the times, man.
Chris Fox?
I have a wide variety of music range. I listen to everything from Bob Marley to U2 to old Metallica. Classical. I like driving, listening to classical music. Believe it or not, it's like it zones you out. Yeah, it really passes the time. I believe the last CD I bought was I believe the Coldplay's release last year.
Dave Cordell?
I too do not have an iPod. Like with musical instruments, I have the ability to really screw electronic things up. So I really don't mess with those too much. And I think the last CD I bought was the newest Jackson Brown album.
Now each of you guys has members of your contingent with you today. All I'm saying is Christmas iPods for these guys.
And what I've noticed is that their own contingents are laughing at them. And then one more very telling question before we get back into Annapolis issues. The World Series is upon us. The question is Yankees or Phillies, Dave?
Phillies, all the way.
Chris?
I think the Yankees are finally, after spending $10 billion in the last 10 years on a payroll, I think they're finally going to make it work.
Phillies.
Phillies? All right. Now, back to the issues at hand. I alluded before the break to the fact that I know where I can go to buy some crack right now. And sadly, that is true. And it's not like this stuff's been moving around furtively around the city over the years. There are some very pernicious problem areas. In the grand scheme of things, Annapolis is really a pretty small town. Why do these pockets still exist? Most of the residents of these neighborhoods don't want it going on. Why hasn't this problem not been able to be addressed, and if not eliminated, at least certainly greatly diminished?
Chris?
Well, I was definitely the candidate to put the issue, and you're talking crime. Most of the crime factually in this town is directly related to the public housing communities. And it's not a shame to live in public housing, but it's a shame that the federal government, answering your question, why is it going on so long? The federal government and the city government have stuck their head in the sand for way too long on this issue for decades. And a lot of it, I believe, is because they take the advice of career politicians and say, don't touch that issue, it's too sensitive. Well, regarding public safety, we cannot have leaders that are afraid of criticism on the issue and at our public safety expense. So I've always been for, being very vocal about the problems with public housing, and I think the long-term solution to these crime areas is to reduce the amount of crime magnets in this town, which are the communities, and doing it responsibly by helping the socioeconomic issue of employment or lack thereof, and helping people in public housing get jobs so long-term there's no more generations of dependency on the federal government.
Dave Cordell?
I've been in law enforcement here in Annapolis for approaching 29 years, and I know exactly where you can go to buy crack and different things, and I thought you looked a little familiar. Just kidding, just kidding. But it's true. There are pockets throughout, and I'm privy to a lot of the intelligence that's gathered, and believe me, we we have resources out there. It's a supply and demand issue, quite frankly, and it's our court system. And I've been dealing with that, as I said, for quite some time. But when we deal with the things in public housing, crime is everywhere. Crime is downtown, crime is in our restaurants, crime is in our businesses, it's in our neighborhoods, and yes, it is in public housing too. So we have to address crime in an area-specific manner. What is happening in Eastport may be a lot different than what's happening over on Clay Street. So the approach that we have to take, the one that I take, is one of the reasons I got involved with the Boys and Girls Club, because it's all about our youth and education. Making sure that we get a hold of these kids, not only in public housing, but across Annapolis, before the streets do. I was responsible for two $50,000 grants to the Boys and Girls Club for an anti-gang program. We have a drug court in Circuit Court where I work just around the corner. That allows people alternatives to sentencing and incarceration where it doesn't stain their background, where they can't go out and get employed. So that's the deal that we're trying to work, is the education.
Josh Cohen.
Thanks. I also served in the criminal justice system, not as long as my friend Dave, but I served as a parole and probation agent for a number of years right here in the courthouse on Round Boulevard. And it's truly heartbreaking to see the generational cycle of crime where senior is locked up and then junior is locked up, and then it becomes a family tradition. And there are look, every city, big or small, urban or rural, has a drug problem. This city has made tremendous progress in bringing down crime and in combating some of the drug problem. We have a long way to go. But as I mentioned earlier, yesterday I presented 5 specifics that I'm going to touch on very quickly in terms of specifically what I'm going to do to continue to reduce crime. The first, like I said, is to ask Chief Pursuit to come back. And I'm the only candidate who can actually make that commitment because I'm the only candidate who believes the mayor's office should continue to have the authority and accountability for what department heads are hired. Number 2 is to expand what's called the Capital Cities Safe Streets Coalition, which is a very big reason why we've been so successful over the past year at reducing crime, because it brings together all these law enforcement agencies at different levels of government. And the next part of that is to touch on youth and to bring in the Boys and Girls Club and nonprofits like Gems and Jewels, because we know who the at-risk youth are. And we need to do a much better job of reaching out to them early before they even start that cycle of crime. And just 3 other things very briefly. Number 1, beef up more foot patrols and targeted enforcement in the trouble spots. Number 2 is better use of technology. There's something coming out called Pocket Cops, where it takes advantage of mobile technology, so police officers on their BlackBerry can pull up criminal justice databases right there. And the 5th thing is more community partnerships.
We have